Always front maggots, welcome to the newest edition of your basic trader, you worthless Easterling scum. I'm Sergeant Rangvar, formerly of the Winian, and I was a soldier of the Thorn Guard. But before that, I was a bandit. You lot are probably asking yourselves, why are damned highwaymen is standing in front of you? Well, don't strain your noggins too much, lads, you need them for helmets. The reason I'm here is because on the roads west of the Winian, I met a lot of strange people, and not just people like us. And now I'm going to tell you how to kill them in case you ever meet them as well. Because so far I've been told you people have been fighting either yourselves or us. But there are far more devious bastards out there. Orcs, elves, dwarves, and don't even get me started on the things that live in the Mirkwood. Now, quite frankly, I can't see a damn bloody thing on those silly masks you lot wear, and I feel like I'm talking to a bunch of lizards. So I'm just going to assume you're all thrilled to begin. So stand at attention and listen well, it might just save your useless lives one day. First, orcs. Now, you lot are allied to Mornedhel, so you probably think you're safe from them. Wrong. Orcs couldn't give a damn about diplomacy or alliances or politics. They exist to fight, murder, and kill. And if they see you, well, they'll try to do all three to you. And if they don't see you, well, then they'll start doing it among themselves. Truth be told, they probably kill more of each other than we ever did. So best thing you can do is avoid them and just observe from afar as the bloodlust makes them tear each other apart. But if you have to fight them, you must remember that an orc is a devious, vicious creature and will rather slit your throat in your sleep or ambush you from behind than fight you openly. By that definition, I'm an orc, and when I'm done with you, you will be as well. Never fight your enemy fairly, poison their supplies, assassinate their officers, hire a Z's whore, and send her to the enemy camp to give them all the clap. All is fair in love and war after all, and orcs will be the first ones to try whatever malicious thing you can dream up against you before fighting in the open. So, if you expect to fight any of these ugly bastards, be on your guard. Although, if they decide to rush you, you're in for a whole different kind of pain. Orcs are awful warriors with awful weapons and all that can fall apart in the middle of a fight. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that once they take to the field, there's always a damn bloody lot of them. And if they gotta climb a mountain their own corpses to reach you, they will. That's what you need to worry about. You may stab one or two, sure, but there'll still be 10 more eager to got you, and they will not wait patiently for their turn. Leave your formation, and they will surround you and rip you to bloody shreds in moments. So when you face a whole lot of bastards, never leave your damn shield wall. Cover your mates, let them cover you, hack or stab when you have your opportunity, but stand in your damn spot. One of you breaks and the orcs will pour into your formation and hack you all up. But do not confuse their relentlessness with bravery. What pushes them forward on the field is usually fear of punishment. Always be on the lookout for the orc captains. They're usually the ugliest, largest bastards out there. They're going to hang back most of the time because they're all bloody cowards. But if you manage to drop one of them, the rest of the orcs should fall in seconds. So, in short, hold the line and kill the biggest, ugliest bastard you see. Or better yet, tell your friends on the cavalry where they are so the horses can run them down. Got all that? Good. Now, the second enemy you're going to face, dwarves. How do you fight a dwarf, you ask? Well, that's the thing, lads. You fucking don't. You ask your fellow crossbowmen to put a quarrel in the stony bugger before you go all up to you and chop off your knees. Only you people don't really use crossbows, so that strategy falls apart right away. And believe me, whatever fancy stuff you put on your arrows, the burn won't even take the little shits. But shoot at them anyway, maybe setting the beards on fire could work. But ideally, you never want a stony to get close to you. They're not that much stronger than we are, but they got their armor going for them. Your laser scares may look fancy and all, but they wear so much iron on them, they're as hard as the rocks to bread them. Your swords and sabers won't make a dent in them, so you just have to go for the faces. Cause that's usually all the part of the bodies exposed. They're proud of their beards, them dwarves, you know, and that gives you a chance. Horses don't like them either. They're too short, too stocky to be knocked out easily, and I've seen entire groups of horsemen breaking the legs of their animals on dwarven shield walls. And unless you have a long lance, they're damn hard to reach from the saddle anyway. Ruins all the balance with a rider. And even if you manage to spear them, it's like pulling a damn mountain. Best to just leave your lance in a bastard you impaled and roll away before his mates swamp you. But for most of you poor infantry bastards, you have to use the one advantage you get: reach and flexibility. you can outrun them, so do that. You want to tore them out as much as you can before fighting, and all that heavy armour means that you can run away from them without losing your breath. Your arms are longer, so use them to keep the midgets as far away from you as you can. If you have a spear, or even better, a fucking pike, you can poke a dwarf to death from a safe distance, while all they can do is hurl insults at you. Make sure you stay in formation though. If one of them breaks your lawns, the rest will pour in like a toy, and up close, it'll be a right mess, because you won't be pushing them back. And while spears and pikes keeping at bay, your fancy lads with their glaives and battle axes can swing around and wreck the stunnies from behind. Don't be fancy. Even a hit with a halberd won't do much against dwarven armour, unless you wail on it for a while, or smack them on their stupid wide heads from above, and concussions will take care of the rest. Then once they're completely disorganised, run them down with your horses, and trust me, the midgets won't break easily, but when they do, your cavalry's gonna have a bloody field day. And finally, elves. I'll be honest with you lads, you're not ready to fight elves. No one bloody is. We trained for a few months, maybe a year before we're sent into battle. They've been training for hundreds or thousands of years. Any trick you can think of, any strike, any fancy feint, they will see it a mile away and counter it like it's nothing. Their archers will outrange and outshoot yours. Their armour is not as strong as what the dwarves wear, but still a damn sight better than what we have, and it doesn't weigh them down as much, so you won't be outrunning them. Hell, I've seen some of the knife-fish chasing down bloody horsemen on foot. And I know all this doesn't sound encouraging, lads, but there is one thing we have that they don't. Numbers. There's probably more people living in your capital city than there are elves in the entirety of the Winion and the Mirkwood combined, and they really don't like losing their mates, so even though they may be dangerous, you will always be able to swarm them. Do to them what orcs would do to us. Surround them, isolate them, hack them apart one by one. Don't be fancy, work together and never try to fight them fairly. Put poison on your arrows and dirt on your blades, so even if you won't kill them, they'll regret being alive. And when they don't see you coming, use that fancy scaly horseman of yours to charge their flanks. It works, unlike with dwarves. That's really all there is to it. Focus on staying alive and an opportunity will present itself sooner or later. Because there's one thing you expect from elves, is a disdain for you. They don't think a man in front of them is any threat, and that's when your mate creeps in from behind and sticks a spear right in the knife to his neck. Doesn't matter how you win, all that matters is you're alive at the end. Got all that? Great, now for the fun part, training. Sadly we don't have any knife-aids or stunnies to practice on, but I can still show you how to fight like a right bastard. So, first man who wants to get kicked in the balls, step forward.
On a nameless plain north of River Selduin, a company of dwarfs stood in loose order, breathing heavily after a long march. Their gaze was fixed on a growing dust cloud on the horizon. Their leader, Draki, let out a weary, miserable sigh under his helmet. "Guess the bloody lizards finally learned how to swim, eh lads?" he asked his men, but they did not respond. The Easterlings have been shadowing them for months across the river, but over the last week or so, a company of raiders crossed to their side and have been harassing the dwarves constantly. Draki didn't lose single one of his soldiers so far, but days of marching in full armor, for an ambush could happen at any moment, took their toll. His company was hungry, tired, and in desperate need of good night's sleep, but it seemed that Imperial forces wouldn't let them rest. Draki knew things would go badly the moment he saw first Runic patrol on the horizon. His enemies had horses. He, on the other hand, had a bunch of heavily armoured dwarves, who might have been born sprinters, but did not perform all that well when marching for 20 hours a day over several weeks. He hoped he could reach safety of River Selduin. Men of Dorwinion had some ferries there that could deliver his exhausted dwarfs to safety, but he knew the Easterlings would never let him reach their great river without a fight. And now, with days of marching still ahead of him, they decided to make their move. "Didn't expect them to cross the river in force. Must be some ford there we missed," he said to his adjutant, and then ordered him to rally the soldiers. truth be told, marching alongside a smaller river was a mistake, Draki now understood. His company could cross it in only few, shallow places, while Imperial troops could ford it almost everywhere. And now they were rapidly approaching the dwarves, and the commander could see glistening golden shimmer in the distance that heralded approach of Imperial horsemen. He put away his whetstone. He's been sharpening his axe on the march for the past week, and it could cut hair in half now, and then readied his men. For they could still get out of this mess alive. They didn't have to win, they simply had to not lose. Still, a growing frustration echoed in his mind, strengthened even more by the discomfort of the last few weeks. Draki told King Dain of Erebor many times that sending his company as scouts was a foolish idea. Far better to hire a few horsemen from Dale and send them out to map the borderlands with speed. But of course, His Majesty refused, for he had a fair few disagreements with Draki over the past few years, and wanted nothing more but to remove him as far away as possible from the court under the Lonely Mountain. The commander wondered if Dain deliberately sent him out to die. He shook this thought away, though, and joined his men, for soldiers of the east were already upon them. Horse archers came first, like they always did over the past week. Only now, they didn't spread out to harass them. Instead, they circled around Draki's company and shot them in the back. Even that didn't help them, though. Dwarven armor such strong and flimsy, crude arrows of steppe shepherds couldn't pierce it, Draki thought with pride. And then, just as he thought that, one of his comrades fell to the ground. One of the nomads got lucky. Curses erupted across formation, and some of the dwarves tried to rush towards horse archers, who just laughed and threw insults and they rode off. "Hold formation, you idiots!" Draki shouted. "Keep marching! They will run out of arrows soon, and they won't dare to attack us head-on. Keep walking! Cover yourselves, and we'll reach the bloody ferry even if we have to keep our shields up for the next damn month!" All the dwarves listened, for not much could break their ironclad spirit, and they kept going. Arrows fell around them. From time to time, one of the warriors of Erebor fell motionless to the ground. A few were wounded, and if they couldn't walk anymore, Draki personally finished them off, for he could not risk carrying them. No one grumbled. They all knew the stakes. The formation marched on, and their armor performed as it should, and suddenly a glimpse of hope appeared. The archers rode off, and a company of infantry appeared marching on the horizon. Could they be Derwinrim, Draki thought, or maybe men of Dale or Rovanian? Whoever they were, their arrival was a blessing. For a few moments at least, until the dwarves noticed golden banners of Rhûn flying above approaching footmen. They stopped dead in their tracks. "Ah, crepe," Draki muttered under his helmet. "Alright lads, change of plans. We won't be outrunning them, so we break through this rubble and keep marching. Rearguard, keep your eyes open. If their cavalry returns, we need time to face them," he ordered, and then his company rushed towards approaching Easterlings. Only these men were not just rabble, as Draki thought. He heard rumors from some local shepherds he met on the hills about some old Rovanian castle being taken over by Rhûn. Apparently, some of the Northmen turned coat, and in exchange for betraying their brothers, they were given the best equipment that once belonged to the old nobility of the kingdom. And these traitors, with their heavy armor and 200 blades, now charged Draki's company right back, and they did not look intimidated by dwarven steel in the slightest. They charged the dwarves with a vicious war cry, and the commander ordered his soldiers to form a shield wall. It worked like it always did. The swordsmen reached the line of steel, and though their blades were heavy and imposing, they could barely make a dent in the shield wall. Just like fighting orcs, Draki thought, and set to work. From behind their shields, his dwarves bit back with their blades in quick strikes, leaving almost no openings. One row of humans fell, then another, but then a horn blared in the back, and horsemen crashed into the back of Draki's formation. Their attack was weak, their spears couldn't pierce solid dwarven armor, and their horses tripped and fell, throwing their riders to their doom. But while it caused almost no casualties, the charge pushed the dwarves around and broke their formation. The footmen in front of them seized the opportunity immediately and broke through the shield wall, and suddenly each one of Draki's friends found himself surrounded, fighting for his life. The horsemen retreated, but another banner charged in their place, causing even more chaos. After every charge, the formation became more and more chaotic, until eventually dwarven lines broke completely, and they all found themselves swarmed and surrounded. Their armor, shields and skill held on though. Some fell, but with yet another ineffectual cavalry attack, Draki thought he and his lads could make it. All they had to do was to keep pushing forward and break the men in front of them. Yet, just as he thought that, one of the footmen lying on the ground, dying and delirious, put all his remaining strength into one defiant thrust of a dagger and plunged it right into Draki's groin. Red Mist descended over the dwarven commander, and with a vicious cry, both of pain and victory, he finished off the man at his feet. But in doing so, he exposed himself just as another cavalry charge came in, and one of the horsemen swung his saber with all his might and took Draki's head clean off. It flew away in an arc and landed in the mud. The last thing Draki saw were his lads pushing ever forward. The last emotion he felt was a sense of pride. And then darkness took him and returned him to the stone, and eternal silence under the mountain. No word of this fight reached Erebor, which was information in itself. Draki and his company were written off as heroic deaths upon the field of battle, but even though King Dain wasn't too saddened at the loss of a political rival, he understood that times of peace were now over. Dwarves of Erebor would have to march upon Rhûn sooner rather than later, or risk Easterlings showing up at the gates of the Lonely Mountain with all the fury of their growing empire. As the war became more tense north of the Sea of Rhûn, back in Mistrand, the Golden City was seeing prosperity like never before, thanks to Kanrukar's policy of cautious welcome to all travelers. No longer was it just the city of Clan Daritai. Other Easterling tribes lived there as well now, together with Southrons, wild men of Khand, and even some trollmen who arrived from so far south, no map showed their homes. Merchants from Nûrn and Mordor arrived as well, just like the counterparts from Gondor, Rohan, Vale of Anduin, and even distant lands of Eriador. And recently, even Dorwynrim established their own enclave within the walls, those dissatisfied with change in the wine court, who betrayed the regent of Caras Sant and sided with Rukar after he promised them at least some of the privileges they lost when elves took over Wine Kingdom's government. Of course, open gates of Mistrand were no charity. All these travellers brought in trade with them, and the city markets bustled with activity as goods changed hands all the time, often between people whose nations were at war. But more importantly, all these guests brought with them something more: information, and thanks to wine that was now being brought into Mistrand taverns from Strondost, learning more about Rhûn trade partners was easier than ever. A drunken sentence here, a repeated rumour there, a ledger accidentally misplaced by a drunken merchant. With a bit of patience, a careful observer could piece together some quite important informations from across Middle-earth. Like, for example, the fact that Gondor was building a massive fleet on their southern coast, which they wanted to use to sail up the river Harnan and strike at Haradrim capital directly. Or rumours about some vagabond who united small bands of Dunedain in Eriador and now waged a guerrilla campaign against Angmar in the north, all seemingly to restore some ancient kingdom. Or there was a hushed whisper about a visitor who came to Edoras and broke old King Theoden of Rohan from years of apathy, supposedly caused by Master of Tower of Orthanc, who seemingly switched sides and became an ally to Barad-dûr. All those whispers added up, and messengers were dispatched to Mordor to inform the Dark Tower and its allies of all these new developments, for the markets of Mistrand, though peaceful and bristling with gold, became one of the greatest weapons in the arsenal of the Dark Lord. and not just because of the wealth and information it brought, but thanks to manpower it provided as well. Many citizens of the Empire departed for Mordor, for great wealth and great prestige was promised to those fighting under the banner of the Eye. Only few returned to enjoy their rewards though. The rest remained on the fields of Ithilien forever, serving as a warning to all those who would dare to invade deeper into the great and powerful kingdom of Gondor. The Empire, however, continued working on its main plan, but before control of the entire Sea of Rhûn could be established, its northern coast had to be brought fully under Imperial control, and that meant dealing with last remnants of the Kingdom of Rhovanion. Ever since Wintirian Yar was seized from them, the remaining hillmen disappeared into the countryside, trying to live off the land, waiting for an opportunity to take their last bit of home back. Theirs was not a pleasant lot. Each day starvation loomed over the host as it marched from place to place, hunting or stealing whatever food they needed. Eventually, they seized a small fishing village at the mouth of the river Selduin, barely a few ramshackle huts in the middle of a swamp, and began fishing and sending raids both against men of Rhûn and the Wine Kingdom on the other shore, in a desperate attempt to survive. Their scouts probed Wintirian Yar Keep every now and then, but with little effect, and one day these scouts returned at full gallop with dire news. Imperial forces were reinforced, and Khan's son Uldor marched out to finish them off. The Northmen could have fled. Perhaps, more importantly, they should have fled. But they were hungry, tired, and furious, and unanimously agreed that the time for running away was over. Their kingdom was gone, the last town was gone, but they would not flee Rhovanion and leave it to invaders from the east without a fight. And so they readied themselves in the swamp and awaited Uldor's arrival. Young Commander's force, in truth, wasn't all that impressive. Composed mostly of conscripts, levies, foreign ancillaries and mercenaries, it lacked the quality of the army that marched on Winion, but for this fight it had to be enough. Imperial troops outnumbered starving men of Rhovanion by a significant margin and had better equipment after all, not to mention 2 banners of Barun cavalry ready to ride down anyone foolish enough to leave their shield wall. But more than that, Uldor's army had one thing the Northmen did not: archers, and a lot of them. When his force approached the swamp hideout, Uldor ordered his men to stop, and his archers began sending volleys of arrows into ranks of poorly equipped Northmen, felling dozens of them with every barrage. The Barun rode onwards as well, and added their own arrows into the chaos, and Rhovanian chieftain Leowyn realized that if he wouldn't move, his men would be shot to death without any way to respond. He blew his horn and ordered the attack, but the muddy, swampy ground of the coast, which they hoped to use to bog down runic troops, now walked against them and slowed down their charge. Still, with barely any armor slowing them down, most of Rhovanian warriors waddled through the mud swiftly, but in doing so completely broke their formations and were then intercepted by golden-clad soldiers in a chaotic brawl. One, where superior equipment and training of Uldor's men quickly won them the upper hand. Northern cavalry tried to flank around, but were shot down by the archers, or broken and chased away by Barun riders, who now had free reign of the battlefield and could charge wherever they wanted. Still, with only the river behind them, Chieftain Leowyn and his men pushed forward, and Chieftain's own heavily armored retinues saw a gap in runic formation and charged through it, right into pikes of awaiting Haradrim. The Southrons did not waver, despite seemingly overwhelming odds, for in the faraway desert homeland they faced worse things than men with 200 swords. Some of Saul's tribe were, like him, veterans of raids into Gondor, and anyone who survived encounters with men of the Stone Kingdom would not break easily. The Southrons held their ground, impelling and pushing away anyone who dared to come close, and in doing so, bought enough time for the rest of the army to finish off Rhovanian rabble and surround Chieftain Leowyn and his men. The Rhûn horsemen attacked time and again, but the soft ground made it difficult for them to build up decent speed for a charge, and after a while the infantry took over, including General Uldor, whose halberdiers carved a bloody path through Rovanian warriors and now descended upon their chieftain. Leowyn fought with all the strength he could muster, but like his men, he too was exhausted and weak after months of living off the land. Soon, one of the halberdiers knocked his legs from under him, and another one finished the chieftain off with a mighty overhead blow. A victorious cheer erupted across runic lines, and upon hearing it, men of Rovanian finally lost their nerve and turned to flee, only to be ridden down by horsemen roaming the field. Not a single Northman left the field of battle. The few hundred that were captured were sent in chains on a long march around the sea, all the way to Mataram, where they would be put to work in iron mines that fueled Golden Empire's armies. The last remnants of the ancient kingdom of Rovanian were no more, and the northern shore of the Sea of Rhûn was now firmly under control of the Empire. All that remained now was the Winian capital of Caras Sant. While army under Priest Charon prepared to march, General Margos and Lord Amdur launched a campaign of their own, right into Windan Forest, home of Avari elves. Thanks to effort of Commander Sal, who, together with several informants from Dwinion itself, joined the operation, the route to the hidden city of Mornedhel in the deep woods was mapped out, and Margos saw an opportunity for a strike. He took his force of mostly conscripts, bolstered by Amdur's retinue and remaining bulk of Locarim, and entered the woods, but in truth he did not hope to actually seize the elven city. He wanted to use his force as bait, for if Easterlings marched into the forest and besieged hometown of the Avari, it could draw attention away from Charon, Rudas and Kavatha, and their force marching on Caras Sant. But to surprise of General Margos and Lord Amdur, Mornedhel turned out to be almost completely undefended. The bait did not work, though when Easterlings arrived in front of the city after weeks of arduous march through dense forest and set up a siege camp, they realized why the Wine Kingdom was willing to leave only a small garrison behind. A huge hill towered over the home of Avari elves, a hill that any invaders could use to rain fire and death on the city below, without fear of return fire. It was, simply put, a completely undefensible location. Margos seized that opportunity immediately, and his longbowmen forced the garrison out of a good quarter of the city on the very first day of siege, for if Northmen tried to hold the walls, they'd find themselves under constant, deadly barrage. Weirder thing, however, was that elves themselves didn't defend their own city. Only a handful of them stood side by side with paladins of the Wine Court, but the rest hid in their homes and hoped for a relief force to arrive. Only it never did. When the siege engines were ready, the assault began, and loyalist Thorngard rushed to defend the wall, and like before, found themselves under relentless arrow fire from Margos and his bowmen. When the Locarim scaled their siege tower, the defenders' numbers were cut in half, and though they stood bravely and did not flinch, they could not hope to survive the attack. In the city itself, paladins and elven warriors tried to draw approaching Easterlings into deadly grind in the streets, but found themselves outnumbered and surrounded by Arulad Glavesmen, the Locarim, and Amdur's personal retinues. Wine Regent picked his paladins personally, and they were well trained and well equipped, and not one of them even dreamed about taking a single step back. But against such overwhelming numbers, not to mention elite Dragonwrath Knights of Lord Amdur, they stood no chance. Their fate was sealed when General Margos brought in his archers and ordered them to shoot into the melee at near point-blank range, forcing defenders to either seek cover from incoming fire arrows or try to defend themselves in close combat. They could not do both, and soon the last paladin fell. Defenders of Mornedhel gave their lives for the cause to the last man, but it was not good enough. The Avari home, one they lost once already, has slipped from their grasp again. Margos was especially proud. In times of old, this city was sacked and destroyed by the Balkoth tribe, and here he was, son of the same clan, seizing it once again. The Easterlings cheered and scattered across the city, dragging terrified civilians out of their homes and divided them into 3 groups. First one, the Northmen, was left alone. They were to be spared and become new, loyal subjects of the Empire, or suffer consequences of defiance. The second group was made of elves, and they would not be treated as mercifully. The leaders of the city, their families and closest associates were interrogated, then burned by dragon priests on the main square, in front of their defeated countrymen. The rest were bound in irons and sent marching south under guard of Salavumba's horsemen. Most, about 1,000, would be sent to Mordor, for the Dark Tower promised great rewards for any living and unspoiled elf. The rest would march to Mistrand, and there would be sold to highest bidders from distant lands in the south and far east, lands where elves were never seen, and where people of Mornedhel would be a valuable commodity. And finally, the third group was rounded up and sent to Lest, for they were neither men nor elves, but something in between. Clearly, the Northmen and the Avari integrated with each other well over the past years, and the result of this union was a small group of half-elven children. Charon himself ordered them to be delivered to Lest without delay, for he wanted his priests to learn as much as possible about these, as he called them, hybrid abominations. When he asked why he wanted to learn about them, Charon simply stated that it was a matter of the court, and that the Empire would no doubt profit from his research. Any other man would no doubt be questioned more, but Charon, with his fiery aura about him, had full trust of the Golden Khan himself, and so a column of children soon departed to Lest in chains, protected by some of the finest soldiers in the land. As for Mornedhel itself, when the news about city's capture reached Mistrand, many of Dorwinian turncoats departed there, sensing an opportunity to fill the gap left by the elves. It was part of the deal they made with Rukar, and he hoped the men he bought with his promises would keep the forest city under control, and even if they didn't, he thought, his men seized it once, and would no doubt be able to do it again. As war raged on land, so too did it upon the sea. The Dorwinian navy had numbers on its side, but the sea-bound Udagay and their deadly fire lancers neutered that advantage, for they prevented any enemy to sail close to runic ships to board them. One by one, Wine Kingdom's fleets were separated and chased down, and every time they did, they had to return to Caras Sant for repairs and reinforcements, which made their movements predictable. For while the Northmen had more ships, Rhuns controlled almost entirety of the coast, and now that advantage was paying off. All around the sea, from Strondost all the way around to Winterian Yor, new fortified ports were built that could repair and service Udege ships, and build a lot more. With every passing week, numbers shifted more and more in Imperial favor, until one day, when the Dorwinian fleet was assaulted and suffered such catastrophic losses that it had to withdraw up the river Kelduin, abandoning the sea entirely. Now, it was the port of Caras Sant that was at the risk of being raided, but the Northmen did not say the last word, as Dalian ships joined the fray on the side of the Wine Kingdom. They sailed a small squadron of ships past runic blockade, citing their neutrality, and sailed all the way to Mistrand to set the dogs there ablaze once again. The Easterlings, however, learned their lessons. Their ports were now fortified with permanent garrisons, and coasts were constantly patrolled by cavalry to prevent any landing. Men of Dale managed to intercept a few trading ships, but then the Udege fleet fell upon them, set their vessels ablaze, and chased them all the way to the north up the river. Another, more permanent blockade was established. Runic warships form a chain across Kelduin, preventing any hostile ship from entering the Sea of Rhûn. The port of Caras Sant was still a threat, for the winemen there could build more vessels, but with army of Grand Priest Charon already on the march, everyone expected the city to fall within the coming months anyway. Still, Dale's involvement in the war was not welcome news for Khan Rukar. The Northern Coalition was now united against his empire. Dale, Dorwinion and Erebor all stood united, ready to push the Easterlings back. And though separately each nation was weaker than the Golden Dragon, together they presented a formidable force, and so the Khan sent word to Charon to move his invasion of Caras along, for at any moment reinforcements could arrive from the north and west and throw Imperial plans in disarray. Finally, the force under the Great Priest left Strondost, bolstered by turncoat Dorwinian soldiers abandoned by their kingdom, or bought by Arukar's promises of immense wealth. The border fortress remained defended only by Lord Amdur's firstborn son, Mukalku, and his retinues, as all other forces were rallied to march north. It was a dangerous gambit, for if army of the Wine Kingdom was indeed lurking somewhere, they could seize this opportunity and retake their border fortress. But just as Rukar had faith in his son, so too Amdur had faith in his. Mukalku was just as young as Amdur was when he first stepped on the battlefield, but he already showed promise both as a commander and as a statesman, and so both his father and grandfather hoped he'd be able to hold the fort, at least until reinforcements could arrive. Amdur's second son, even younger lad by the name of Marwan, took to the field as well. His father, together with General Margos and Commander Sal, were busy securing Windan Forest, and Marwan was ordered by his father to keep watch on Mornedhel itself. He was told to be ready to abandon the city at any moment though, for the scouts brought word of a large army of Northmen massing in the north, army that could threaten both Mornedhel and Strondost. Still, despite this threat, the order to march on Caras Sant was given, but the Northmen did not react. Charon and his soldiers moved quickly, their horsemen scouting far and wide ahead, constantly expected an army of the Wine Kingdom to appear among the trees or beyond the next hill. But no such thing happened, and after a month of marching, Dragon Priest reached the port city of Caras Sant and began a siege. The garrison locked the gates, but immediately it became clear elves were part of defensive force, for as Arulad engineers set up their ballistae, they suddenly found themselves under heavy fire from the walls and ramparts. A dozen of them fell before they even realized what was happening, and another dozen followed as the panicked crews tried to push their engines back out of range of the defenders. No man could aim that well and fire arrows at such a distance, and Charon realized that this assault would not be as easy as the one on Strondost. This time, careful planning was necessary, and as a siege camp was set up, both sides prepared to fight each other with not just blades, but with subterfuge and deception. On the very first night of the siege, a group of elves, clad in black cloaks and almost invisible in darkness, snuck outside of the city and attacked the camp. They slit throats of a few careless sentries, set Arulad ballistae on fire and fled before anyone could react. It took almost a month to replace the engines, but with Rhûn under full Imperial control, new machines could be delivered by boat instead of trekking all around the sea. Then, the next day, the city almost fell, when in a foggy morning, right before sunrise, a unit of Dragon Wrath Knights scaled the walls and seized the gatehouse, but were forced to retreat by elven arrows. For the next few months, every single day and night had some surprise in store for both attackers and defenders, but Charon kept one trick left for the final push. On the day of the assault, when runic forces gathered at the siege engines around town, a column of dust was spotted east of the city. A company of Thorngard was running towards it, shouting at the garrison to open the gates and let them in before the attack began. Those were not reinforcements, however, but turncoats under command of Captain Lefric. Until now, they were kept away from the city and took no part in the siege, so to defenders it looked like a relief force has arrived. And it worked. The gates were opened, and the company ran full pelt into town, only to realize that Dorwinian soldiers saw through their ruse. As Lefric and his men ran through the gate, they suddenly found themselves face to face with hundreds of defenders, who swarmed them from all sides. Elven and human archers rained arrows from walls and towers, killing dozens of traitors on the spot. Charon's plan to take the eastern gate by surprise failed, and a chaotic melee between Northmen erupted under the walls. But even though Captain Lefric's men were outnumbered, surrounded and outclassed, they still fought like lions, and kept almost half of the garrison occupied for a long time. Even when an Avari blade cut off his arm, Captain Lefric pushed his men forward, with hatred driving them despite their wounds. Ultimately, the company was broken, and only a handful of men limped away from the city, and all of them had scars to show from this battle. But the garrison made a mistake as well. In their desire to punish and wipe out the traitors, they sent way too many men than it was necessary to the eastern gate, and the Easterlings used this opportunity to the fullest. At the western entrance of the city, Rhûn Cavatha broke through the gate and found it defended only by a small company of court paladins. These elven and human warriors were the cream of the crop of Dorwinion, but Knights of the Dragonwrath were better, not to mention more numerous and better equipped, and soon the western gate was seized and black and gold-clad warriors stormed into the city proper, slaughtering anyone they could find. But as they rushed to support Charon's assault, they suddenly found themselves face to face with Dorwinion's new standing army. The sight made Rhûn and Cavatha stop dead in their tracks for a moment, for they have never seen such troops before. These men were not levies of the Thorn regiments. Instead, the knights saw organized rows of men clad in bright, glistening Avari steel. Their training was evident. Not a single man broke the shield wall as both lines clashed, and the fight that followed tested invaders' skill to its fullest. The Northmen were equipped with large wooden shields that kept them safe, but cut-out parts allowed them to stab over or under their barriers with ruthless speed and precision. Cavatha's swift blades had to take deadly risks, using one of their blades to drag the shield away and another to hit the man behind it, a maneuver that left them open to many counterattacks. Rhûn's knights fared better though. Their shields were heavier and larger, and they used them to bash enemy guard away, and then swung with their own curved swords, which even Avari steel could not withstand forever. And though the Northmen clearly undergone rigorous training and were disciplined, Imperial knights had years of experience under their belts, and though they paid with blood for it, soon they broke through ranks of new standing army and joined the fray at the southern gate. And there, Easterling soldiers fared a lot worse, for Avari warriors themselves awaited them beyond the gate. Dozens of Arulad glavesmen fell to their arrows before they could even get close, and those who did fared no better, for the elves wielded great two-handed blades with skill that terrified the invaders. Once Charon's halberdiers secured the gatehouse, they joined the fray too, but even to his zealous elite warriors, elves were deadly opponents. They withdrew slowly towards the center of the city, bleeding the Easterlings with every step, but paid heavy price themselves. But what Charon said about them was proven true. Even as the elves were pushed further and further into the city, they showed no respect to their foes, thinking they could easily defeat them. They'd step out of their ranks and challenge dragon knights to duels, and get immediately surrounded and hacked to pieces. As the fight moved to the center of Caras Sant, the Haradrim joined the battle as well, and clashed with Dorwinion elite footmen in the streets in a bloody slog. Neither side could gain ground. In tight streets, the Northmen could not push through rows of pikes, but said pikes had trouble piercing Avari steel, and the fight ground down to a stalemate, and the streets ran red with blood of both sides, until, eventually, dragon knights struck the defenders from behind, causing panic among the ranks. For in the main square, despite brave display of prowess from the garrison, the Easterlings gained the upper hand. Elves and winemen fell to their steady, disciplined assault. Rows of soldiers would step forth, fight for a while, then step back to be replaced by their rested comrades. When the Arulad circled around, the encirclement was complete, and victory was all but secured. The last remnants of the garrison gathered on the stairs of the wine court, but soon their blood turned the stone red, just like the wine of the realm. The elves fought to the last, but when final Avari fell lifeless to the ground, the remaining handful of Northmen threw down their weapons, begging for mercy, if not for them, then for the people of the city. Charon, Rhudas and Kavatha, their armor broken, dented and covered in blood, stepped forth and reached out to the broken defenders and told them to rise. There would be no pyres on this day, not for the men of Dorwinion, at least, for they were now subjects of the Golden Empire. The Northmen, Charon said, were not the enemy, the Avari elves were, for they dragged Dorwinion into this war and now hid behind their human warriors while sipping wine in the court. Now they would pay the price, and if the Northmen wanted to prove their newfound loyalty to the Empire and save their lives, all they had to do was to pass judgment themselves.
Another mug of wine, brother Rhudas. Say what you will about these Northmen, they do know how to make a good drink. I prefer our own beer from Mistrand, to be honest, and I really shouldn't drink anymore. I'm already seeing 3 of everything. Come now, friend, you don't have to be so stiff all the time. Our men are celebrating our victory, and I'd say we deserve a break as well. Come on, I liberated an entire barrel of salted pork and I'm not going to eat it all by myself. And there was a box of some fancy leaves from some place called Shire. Tried to make tea from them first until I realized you're supposed to smoke them. You could use some of it, makes you forget all the bruises and scars from combat. And how to breathe sometimes, so don't overdo it. Alright, I could use that after today. Give me that pipe. Don't care where it came from as long as I don't have to feel that cut on my arm. You have to admit this fight was tough. How do you feel? Don't get me started. These new Grape Stomper soldiers are something else. Really gave us a run for our money. If there's more of them mustering in the west, we're in for some rough battles. And the elves... I fought many dangerous foes in my life, but these black-cloud bastards almost had me a few times. If not for some of my men, I'd be lying dead on the street now. I never knew someone could wield a blade so large with such speed and agility. Aye, fighting them was like trying to stop the wind. You swing your sword and the knife-eared bastard is already somewhere else. You'd think archers would fold easily in close combat, but I guess they had time to master both blade and bow in that blasted forest. If we'll face more of them, you know it will be up to us to deal with them. You saw how quickly the Erland and our Northmen fell under fire. Aye, poor bastards. Then again, better them than us, I guess. Still, the turncoats did their job. I did not expect half of the garrison would abandon their post to crush them. If traitors stormed the walls of Mistrand, you'd want to slice them up as well, brother. It's one thing to fight an enemy, but seeing your own countrymen on enemy side is far worse. Still, I heard the old captain and a fair few of his men got lucky. Sure, they got some new arrow holes in them, but they'll live. I admit, after a few nights around the campfire with that old bastard, I'd be sad to see him gone. Don't be so quick to trust Captain Lefric, brother Rhudas. He betrayed his own people, and one day he may well betray us. Master Charon, we were just... At ease, brave knights. If anyone deserves a celebration after today, it's you two. I talked to the men, and they all say you both fought like lions. The garrison threw all they had at you, but your flame burned brighter. So enjoy this peaceful evening, friends. And if you do not mind, pour me a mug of that wine. My throat is parched from shouting orders and interrogating captives. Of course, Master Charon. Here you go. Are the prisoners interrogated and rounded up? Yes. The winemen were quick to turn on their elven masters, and we learned a lot. No doubt you both noticed that so far our campaign against Dorwinion was going suspiciously easily, and they offered barely any resistance even here in the capital. But it looks like they're not out of the fight yet. All prisoners I talked to say the same thing. There is a massive force mustering in the west in Sant. It looks like the Grape Stompers are betting everything on a single strike.
I already send word to General Margos and Lord Amdur, for if that army moves towards them, they may have to retreat from Mornedhel. My priests will continue interrogations, but the prisoners will wait for ships to arrive. We won't be sending them overland. They may be intercepted by winemen on the road to Strondost. But the sea is ours now, so we can send them all to Mistrand by boat. I'm sure the Khan and his master in Mordor will be pleased to see more elven prisoners. Our master, you mean? Of course. Forgive me, brothers, today took its toll on me. But remember that as Knights of the Cult, our duty is first and foremost to the Empire and the Khan. We serve him, and he serves Barad-dûr. Do not forget that. But enough about politics. Thank you for the wine, but I must return to work. There is still some prisoners I need to tend to. You mean the hybrids? I heard you ordered them to be separated from other prisoners. What do you want to do with those kids? Understand them. I know people whisper about it, but you can trust me. What I do is for the good of the Empire. You can't just say that and expect us to not be curious. Come now, you can shed some light on this mysterious plan of yours. We won't tell anyone, and with all the wine we're drinking, we probably won't even remember this talk in the morning. Very well. As you know, elves are our foes, and that is something we cannot change. They despise us for not wanting to be under their influence like lords of Derwinion. But the Northmen, as we all know, are reasonable, and can become loyal subjects of the Empire. But we know almost nothing about these half-elves. Do they share the disdain of their elven parents, or can they be turned into valuable assets like our fellow men? If we could train them, mold them, light the flame of the golden dragon within them, they could become a powerful force in the hands of our great Khan. Even if they do not live as long as elves, with proper training and discipline, we could turn them into an elite force that could serve entire generations of Imperial citizens on the battlefield. Look at us. In 2 or 3 decades, our sword arms will begin to wilt, and time will take its toll on us. But imagine Knights of the Dragon Wrath, who could train and fight not for few decades, but for few centuries. They would be an unstoppable force. And more than that, they could pass their longevity along to their own children. One day, citizens of the Empire may outlive all other men of Middle-earth by hundreds of years. You want to make more hybrids? Does the Khan know of this, Master Charon? You know he is not fond of knife-ears. And neither am I, brothers. But I will not let such an opportunity pass us by, not when entire Rhûn can benefit from it. The Khan is aware of my plan, though he doesn't believe it possible, and, truth be told, he may be right. As I said, we know next to nothing about these half-elves. My plan hinges on them being reasonable, and us being able to train and instill proper discipline and loyalty to the Empire within them. If we fail, the pyres will burn again, and nothing will be lost. But if we succeed, then we may light a completely new flame within the Empire, one that will turn all our foes to ashes. It won't matter how many allies and soldiers they will rally against us. If my idea works out, nothing, nowhere will be able to stop us, and entire Middle-earth will finally know order and peace.